right, folks, we are back yet again with another episode of Fresh Juice, an indie game podcast. I am one of your hosts, the enigmatic Tommy Fresh, and joined as always is my cousin on the ones and twos. Not really on the ones and twos, just on a different mic. It is
Matty Juice. What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the pod. Really excited about today's episode. I am a little under the weather right now, so if I sound a little different, that's the reason for that. But yeah, excited for another ep, Tommy. How's everything going?
It's gone, man. I'm excited to review this game, The Invincible. This is definitely, yet again, another big step in a direction that we haven't gone yet. Not to say that we won't continue to take these kinds of steps in terms of the genres of games that we play. But it is very interesting, and I'm excited to talk to you about it because we only talked about a little stuff that we couldn't talk about first, and then we'll kind of figure out what we think about the game, each of us. So, but besides that, man, I'm good. I'm good. It's still busy at work, but I think we're starting to get to the slowdown season. What did I do? I went to a birthday party. My friend Will, who Wyro Firon on the out there, doing the gritty. He had his 30th, no, not 30th birthday. He's my age, 32. He had a party that was fun. We played Jackbox games, and on Sunday, hung out with my sister, her boyfriend, my co-host of a different show, Gary, his girlfriend, and then my sister's landlord. That was weird. But nice. That was a good time. And then, just kind of played more Jackbox actually, because, there's not a lot of board games that you can play with like 7 people. So, it was a good time. But what about you, man? You pretty low key weekend or?
Yeah, we talked a little bit before the show about, some stuff that happened over the weekend. I won't get into it on the show, but mostly last week I was away at the Poconos with my wife, with Maria, so that was great. We went to her grandma's got a house up there, so we went to the casino, Mount Airy Casino. Lost a little bit of money there. They have Guy Fieri's restaurant there, which is nice. And then what else did we do? There's a cool candy place up there that makes their own candies and all that sort of stuff. They have every type of candy imaginable and chocolates and all that stuff. So we picked up a few things there. And then we actually it's kind of cool going up to the Poconos house, and it kind of reminds me of when we would go to our cousin Danny Cups. We would go to his mountain home. It almost feels like stepping back in time. So we there's a old school TV at this Pocono house, and it only plays DVDs and VHSs. There's no cable. There's basically no internet at all. So we went to Walmart. We picked up Home Alone 1 and 2 because it was just a bundle. And so we were watching some DVDs and stuff, which was cool. And it's watching the previews for the DVDs. We were watching stuff where Monsters Inc. was just announced, so they're doing trailers for Monsters Inc. So it's cool. But one thing I did realize is DVDs are expensive, man. At least at Walmart, we were looking for a clearance bin or something, or $5 DVDs. We bought Home Alone 1 and 2. It was $8, and that was the cheapest one that they had. Everything else was $20 or more dollars, and I was just this is ridiculous. It's not even Blu-ray; it's just a DVD. So that was just kind of eye-opening for us. But it's always cool to kind of I know at our cousin Danny Cup's mountain house, we would play the old school consoles and all that sort of stuff with the old school TV, and I just kind of like having that little reset, of just I don't need everything to be connected all the time, sort of thing, So yeah, it was great. It was a nice little reset. The weather was great up there. I mean, obviously this time of year it looks great in the fall, in the Poconos. So yeah, and we actually did see a bear. Right near the house on our way home at night. We saw a bear cub run across the street, and that was actually the first time that Maria has ever seen a bear up there, and she's been going there for
Whoa.
30 years, basically. So that was pretty cool as well, But yeah, it was a good time. was a good time.
Bears are cool. Bears are cool. We had one in our backyard not too long ago. It's it's crazy. They just like kind of just show up. Then again, I guess it's their world and we're just living in it.
Yeah.
With a lot of stuff in nature. But yeah, the DVD thing is crazy because like who's still buying them is the real question. But and I also think that like a lot of these production companies are trying to recoup some of the money they lose in at the box office because it's just not very lucrative to make a movie anymore. I don't think, unless like it's a blockbuster and everybody's going to see it. So,
Yeah.
and actors and crew and everything that they want more money, rightfully so. So, they gotta, I guess, make it up somehow. But that's not what we're here to figure out. We're here to figure out stuff about indie games. So, before we get to the review, let's talk about some news. I saw here, you threw in here a couple things. The first thing here is IGN had an article. Well, basically, this is news for everything. Nintendo Indie World Showcase. One of the cooler indie game things we see in the general media. I think what that Nintendo does, they do this big showcase of all the indie games coming to the Switch or hopefully something different going forward, maybe a new console at some point. But so they showcase a couple games here, and a couple of them caught my eye. The first one is this game called Core Keeper, which is a game that's been on early access on Steam for a while, and it's going to get a full release for the Switch, which is pretty cool. It seems like they call it a top-down sandbox game. Set in an underground world. Seems cool. Also, this game Howl, really cool art style. I would check it out. And Backpack Hero I'd heard of, and certainly, was surprised it wasn't already on Switch, to be honest. And then, there's some cool stuff, as well as an announcement for Outer Wilds coming to the Switch, which a lot of people talk about that game, and I've been wanting to play it. And that might be a great opportunity for myself to play that game when it comes to the Switch. Just easier, portable,
Yeah.
and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Anything catch your eye?
Yeah, no, I was actually going to mention Core Keeper as well. Our buddy Cameron, shout out to Cam. He loves Core Keeper. Like he was raving about it when it went on PC, and I almost picked it up, but I think I was just playing too many games at the time where I just couldn't pick it up. So this will probably be something I end up getting on the Switch. Or I don't know if they're going to have crossplay with the PC. Maybe I'll get the PC version if it's cheaper. But I know that game has had great reviews, and just the audience and the player base loves that game in general. So definitely, keep your eyes peeled for Core Keeper on Switch. But yeah, I also thought that Blade Chimera looked kind of interesting. It's like a side-scrolling 2D action game, and it just seems like it has an interesting art style. It's almost like I don't know. It's almost like the environment is three-dimensional, kind of like 3D art, but then the actual characters themselves are like a 2D, like hand-drawn characters. So I don't know if it's something that I would play, but definitely. I just love the art style for it. There were also a few games in this article that like they didn't have trailers for. Some of them even came out today because this Indie World Showcase was today. Funny enough, too, I actually saved an article about the announcement of the Indie World Showcase a few days ago, not realizing that it actually was the day that we're recording today. So I swapped out the article for like all the announcements that happened today. But yeah, there's also a game called The Gecko Gods that I was checking out, and that one's coming in spring of 2024. It definitely seems like an indie game. It seems like it maybe is made by like just a few people, but it's a game where you play as a gecko, and it's kind of like a platformer, a 3D platformer, which kind of seemed pretty cool. And then the other one was Heavenly Bodies. So this is coming in February 2024. And it seems like a really fun like co-op game where basically it's like a top down of you and your partner in like a some sort of space station, and you're kind of like you don't have bones really, like it's kind of that zero gravity or whatever, and so you have to work together to kind of move things and get around, I guess, like the space station. I haven't really looked into it too much, but it seemed pretty interesting. And then lastly, yeah, Outer Wilds. I actually did play a bit of it. It is on Game Pass. I didn't get super into it, but I know people love it. So I definitely would say it's worth a shot. Like it definitely wasn't a game that I hated or anything like that. It's just I just didn't. It was just kind of slow for
Hmm.
me. I didn't get like super into it, but I know people love that game. So maybe who knows? Maybe it's worth checking out again. Maybe I'll check it out at some point. But yeah, I think it's a really good lineup overall, and we know Nintendo's always good with these indies. So um, yeah, just keep your eyes peeled for the next few months for all these indie games coming out. Um, but I also put in the indie news here, and I'm not sure if you've seen any of this already, but there has been a lot of controversy over the Game Awards and specifically the indie nominations.
Hmm.
So, for those who don't know, the Game Awards happen every December. It's probably the largest, Game Award ceremony that we have in the gaming industry. The other one is kind of the Golden Joystick Awards, which I believe recently happened. Um, but the Game Awards is definitely like the premium kind of spot for announcements and things like that. So the controversy comes with the indie nominees. So the indie nominees for the Game Awards this year are Cocoon, which is great. We know it's a game that we reviewed in the first episode. Um, Dredge, which is a game I've seen before but haven't played. Sea of Stars, which is another game that I have seen a lot of. Viewfinder, which is a game that I've actually played a bit of, and it is a lot of fun. Very interesting mechanics in that game. And the last one, which is where the controversy is Dave the Diver, which I have seen some gameplay for. And the controversy comes around, is it really an indie game? Is Dave the Diver really an indie game? Because their studio is a subsidiary of Nexon, who is a billion-dollar
Yeah.
company. So a lot of I've seen a ton of people on Twitter talking about this, and even this article that we're looking at has a bunch of quotes from people on Reddit and Twitter and all that sort of stuff, and they're arguing what is an indie game? Is an indie game based on the budget of the studio or the publisher, or is it based on what the game actually is? I've seen people argue that, well, indie games, they have to look a certain way, and then that's what makes it an indie game. But then other people are like, well, no, it doesn't matter what they look like because there's a bunch of different genres in the indie space. And everything looks kind of different. What matters is like how big the team is and how much money and backing they have. So I'm curious to see what you think about this, Tom, because to me, Dave the Diver looks like an indie game. I never knew they were owned by Nexon, so I'm kind of shifting my thoughts right now. And I mean, I'm maybe more on the financial side of things when it comes to indies, but I'd love to know kind of what you're thinking here.
Yeah, this is going to be a question that probably comes up constantly, right? Like what makes an indie game? And you mentioned like it has to look a certain way, right? And we played a game this week that looks like a AAA game, to be
Yeah.
honest, but it's I mean, as far as I could tell, pretty independent of AAA. There's a quote here that, a more accurate category would be stylized non AAA game. Would be a more accurate category, but that's not as cool as indie, so who cares about the truth? Am I right? That was a tweet that's been quoted. Don't have the actual tweeter, but yeah, it's a little
The
tough.
tweeter.
The $100 billion company kind of having the subsidy, like it's tough, right? Because I don't think there's anything wrong with that, but when the game gets nominated, that is a smaller, truly independent studio that doesn't have a game in that slot, right? Um, and yeah, it's tough. Like I don't know. I mean, well, I hope it doesn't win. I think based on the controversy, it probably won't. Also, I didn't play the game, so I don't really know. I would if I was a betting man, Cocoon probably has a great shot, but I will say, I played it before we started this podcast. Dredge was a certified fresh juice for myself. That game was so good.
Ooh.
And Sea of Stars is a spiritual sequel to another game. I think I forget what it was. I forget what it was. It was a totally different genre of game. It was like an action platformer. Maybe it was The Messenger or something like
Oh, The
that.
Messenger.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes, it is. Yeah.
Um, and yeah, I don't know. It's like weird. I would have rather have seen a different game there if this is the case, you know. So I can understand why people are upset. And you know what? I'm
Yeah.
upset too. This is a podcast, and we need to be inflammatory. Ah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah.
No, yeah. No, I mean, it sounds like we're both like kind of on the same page with like the financial aspect is important when it comes to indie games. And I think, you know, what makes indie games so awesome is all the restrictions that they kind of put on themselves, right? It's like how clever can we be? How unique can we be? How can we stand out from the AAA guys? And I think the financial part is a big factor with that. You know, it's like if you don't have any financial issues, then you don't really have any restrictions. You can do whatever you want, you know. So I think that, you know, like I look at a game like Valheim all the time. It's just like this game, they didn't know if it was going to be successful. I think there's like 5 or 6 people that made the game, and then it just blew up. And they've made a ton of money with it, and they still take their time, you know, developing new content for it. They're not like kind of, you know, like, oh, okay, now we can do expansions every 3 months and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, I definitely feel like I agree. I don't think it should have been nominated for this category, at least. I do think it's just odd, and I think that's where most people are kind of landing on this, is that they're the David the Diver just should not be in this category at all. But anyway, I know there's probably some other outliers out there that are similar to David the Diver that, you know, we can maybe look into at another time. But it is really interesting overall. But I also put in here, unless you had anything to add to that,
Oh no, I
Tommy.
was just gonna say there's probably gonna be times when we review a game that it's probably similar. We don't even know. I mean, you really got to be in the weeds to kind of figure that kind of stuff out, right? Like, sure, it's all like public information that it is
Yeah.
owned by Nexon, right? But sometimes you just play a game you think is an indie game because it seems like one. It's made by one developer that isn't one that you've ever heard of, and all of a sudden you hear that. So like, there's gonna be, it won't be the first time it comes up, you know, in terms of, especially if it starts getting accolades as being an indie game, you know. So that's all I wanted to add.
Yeah. Yeah, no, and that kind of reminded me of what we were talking about with Cocoon. Is like Devolver is like the AAA studio of indies, kind of in a way,
Hmm.
right? So it's like, at what point does Devolver grow enough where people start considering them not indie anymore? Like, is there a threshold where they hit? Oh, now they're a $200 million company or whatever it might be, and we no longer consider that indie. You know, it's very interesting. It's a really interesting conversation. I don't think there's an exact right answer, but I feel like this is going to be the start. You know, like next year, those indie games are going to be put under a microscope, all those nominations, and to make sure that they're, you know, approved by the public, I guess, in a way. So yeah, definitely really interesting conversation going on. But yeah, I put another piece of news in here, which is really just Fresh Juice related.
Oh,
And we received an email, and I just thought it was pretty cool. So there's this website called podstatus.com, and they apparently, what they do, I looked into them a bit. They essentially have a bunch of different charts that they track for all different podcasts, and for pretty much any podcast that's part of like an RSS feed. And they'll actually email you from time to time and just show you where you are in the rankings and things like that, to try to get you to sign up for their service. I think it's like a $5 a month service, something like that. We're not sponsored by them, but just kind of being transparent here about what they are. But they emailed us, and they actually said that the title of the email is "Fresh Juice, an indie game podcast, is ranking very well in Poland."
let's
So
go.
yeah, we are position 7 in the category of video games in Poland. We are position 14 in the category of leisure in Poland. And in the US, we are position 215 in the category of video games. So we are top 250
That's
in the US
pretty cool.
already.
Shout out
That is
to
cool.
our Polish fresh juice heads. You know, we love you. I think it's awesome. I want to go there. Let's play video games in Poland. That's what I've been saying. You know what? That was the goal, right? When we started this podcast. And yeah, that's pretty cool. Two in the top 250 U.S. and then top 7 Poland.
Yeah. Just think, this time next year we're gonna get an email where we're the top one,
Who's
top dog.
who's 1 through 6? I want to know. Because we gotta take them
uh,
out.
we do
Yeah.
one at a time. Podcastle.
But that's pretty
That's
cool. That's yeah.
yeah,
Um.
yeah.
Well,
So that was the bit of news there. Not really news, not an article, but I just figured it'd be cool to share with the listeners.
big things, folks. Now, speaking of big things, we do have the main squeeze, and as you all know, the main squeeze is our review of the game of the week, which is the Invincible. Do you want to give us the elevator pitch for what this game is, Mr. Juice?
Yes, absolutely. So, first off here, The Invincible is a sci-fi adventure game. It's an FPS, and it's actually based on a novel with the same title. And I'm going to be reading a bit of like how they describe the game because there's a lot of kind of mystery in this game. But you start out as a highly qualified, sharp-witted astrobiologist named Yasna. And essentially you crash land on a planet and you're trying to figure out what is going on here. Where's your crew? What's with the mystery of this planet? Like I said, it is first person. So you're kind of getting that, sort of unique perspective of like, what does Yasna think about all this sort of stuff? So yeah, it really is just a very story driven game where you're just kind of, it's almost like you're playing through the novel in a way. So yeah, without kind of getting too much into the detail, because I know we're going to talk a bit about the story in the review, that's kind of this game in a nutshell.
Yeah, it is. It is an interesting game and very unique in the fact that it's based on a novel, right? You see books get turned into movies or television shows all the time, but I would love personally to see more of this happen with some other books, with some video games, which is kind of fun. But let's get to the gameplay here. The gameplay, is pretty simple. I think is the best way to put it. You said first person. Yeah, you are first person. And you get a couple different gadgets. Now, one thing that shows you close life forms, one thing that will show you kind of a not infrared version or vision of stuff, but it's something like that, except it shows metals and items. You also have like a telescope thingy, like a thing that like you can zoom in. You use that to kind of like basically find points of interest, and when you click on them, usually progresses the story. You can interact with some stuff, but you're really just running around and trying to find these little spots that you gotta like click on to continue the story, and like also figure out some certain, not puzzles, but like there is, like you said, it's very mystery oriented, so you have to figure out some stuff, find some stuff, and find different pieces to the journal, which ends up being your map, and will show you kind of like where things are, where you need to be going, based on usually when you find pieces of the journal from whatever, maybe another crew member or somebody else, it will, they make it clear everybody really took good notes, right? Every character's took really good notes. So whenever you find notes there, it's really just helping you get through the story. So the gameplay, there's not a whole lot there to talk about in terms of like what it is. It's very simple. If you ever played a first person game, you're just running and then usually click the right trigger or however, like, I don't know what it was on the keyboard, but if you see something, you just click on it and it will either progress the story via you talking to the one person still up on the ship. That's where most of the storytelling is happening, and we'll talk about when we get to story. But that will happen, or you'll just interact with whatever the thing is, right? Whether you get into like a rover, like something to kind of like drive around. You can turn on the key or open up a certain thing to try to unlock whatever records are inside the rover, and there on, so on and so forth. So That's what the gameplay. It's not. It's not anything crazy exciting or really skill intensive, but it just is a kind of. So I guess like a best way to put it is in a lot of games you'll see story is something to help push along the gameplay for you, like this awesome gameplay. This is going to be the opposite. The gameplay is to help push the story into your face, and help it like really like send it home and make it just flow. Which I think it did a great job at that. It's nothing crazy, but it was exactly what this game needed. Was just, hey, super easy, no complex controls or anything like that. And they kind of lay out things and give you good indicators in terms of what you can interact with or when you can interact with it. If perhaps maybe you're doing it out of order, it'll show an X rather than just a regular circle that you can click on. So yeah, pretty easy. I don't know. The gameplay was fine. It was smooth. I didn't really have any issues with it. How about you?
Yeah, no, I think like it's exactly what you said, where like the gameplay is helping you push along the story. Like it literally feels like they just took a book, put it into like Chat GPT, and they were like, make a game
Yeah.
off the book, like that's kind of what this feels like. So yeah, and I also did see a good amount of people kind of describing this as like a walking simulator, which it sort of is, right? And usually that's used to like kind of I don't know, it's not a good thing when people describe a game as a walking simulator, but I think in this case it's fine, that this is a walking simulator because it's almost trying to be because of the story. And the only thing that kind of bothered me in terms of like the story, or just in terms of the gameplay with the story, it's weird because you're kind of talking about both at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
So I know we haven't gotten really to the story part, but there's a lot of dialogue that happens and you can't move because you're waiting for the dialogue to finish.
Mm-hmm.
And so that from a gameplay perspective just kind of bothered me a bit. Is, I'm so used to games where like I can be doing anything in the gameplay and I can still listen to like the audio of like what the story is or like person talking to me or whatever it might be. This is a very slow paced, story driven kind of simulator game. So if don't, there's another game called The Soulless Project that I was kind of thinking that this game was going to be more like, where it's essentially a survival sort of game, where you are on a planet. It's it's in space. It's all sci-fi. There's like different storms and things like that. It's a single player game where you're exploring this planet, trying to figure out what the heck's going on here. But it is more, it's faster paced, or it's normal paced, I guess I would say. This game is very slow paced, so I was not anticipating that getting into it. I actually played with mouse and keyboard, and then I also played with controller. And I would say like the experience was the same between the two. I didn't, because the game is so simple, there's really only a few buttons for you to hit. I didn't really find a huge difference between that. You mentioned the rover. I found the rover extremely frustrating, to try to like figure out where I need to go, because the game is first person. They're trying to immerse you, so you have this like little window that you're looking out, and there's just like there's storms happening and stuff, and I'm just like, I don't know where to go. And then I ended up figuring out that I could just look at my map, and it actually had, or look at the journal, and it actually has like a little icon for where your character is, and you can kind of figure out where to go from there. But it took me way too long to figure that out. So this game isn't really going to be doing a lot of hand holding, I feel like, at least with those sort of things that you might be used to in other games. And then really like the two other things, one of them is a good thing, one of them's kind of not a good thing. I thought that we'll start with the not so good thing. I don't know why there's no flashlight in the game.
Mm.
It's just like so confusing to me. It's like you literally are on a planet, like where there could possibly be cave systems or nighttime, and you don't have a flashlight. Like it just doesn't make any sense to me. Like not even on the suit. Like that's like, I feel like that's like space exploring 101. It's like have a flashlight. something on your helmet, whatever it is. So that was kind of a little frustrating, especially in some parts, and we'll talk about the story in a bit. Um, but just capping it off with a good thing about the gameplay. And I don't know if this is something that you had noticed because I don't know if you played it all in one like sitting or anything like that. But I played a bit. I played maybe 30 or 45 minutes on PC, and then I actually used my Steam Link down on my TV to play with like controller. Just because it is such a narrative based game, I just kind of wanted to sit back and just kind of enjoy it a bit. And what I noticed is that like when you're loading into the game, there's a little like comic strip
Mm-hmm.
that kind of catches you up on the story,
Yeah.
which is really cool. Like the last thing that kind of happened, and that's probably a good segue to get into like the story of the game. So yeah, curious to see kind of what you think about the story. Now there are restrictions; we can't talk about everything. They don't want us to get too into it, but we can at least kind of talk about the beginning of the game and kind of how we felt about that.
Yeah, yeah, and I do. You know, you talking about your complaints there did bring up one major gameplay complaint that I had was sometimes there was just nothing going on. Like you were just walking a really long time, and and you wouldn't even have a lot of dialogue happening. So,
Yeah.
you know, it would just kind of, and it was almost funny. Like they almost knew, like there was at one point, and this is not spoiling anything, but like Yasna says, ugh, this mission's dragging on, which it felt like it was dragging on, you know, when you're playing like in between these large areas that you're walking to. And that was like my number one complaint. The rover didn't bother me as much. I felt like I didn't get lost on it ever, but I could see how it might be. But yeah, in terms of the story, right? It's your classic wake up, don't remember anything. I'm on a planet. You know, they give you the backstory right out of the gate, basically that you're on this research space exploration team. The team finishes a really big set of missions, and then they're like headed home. Right? They're just gonna go home, but for whatever reason, they don't go home, and she wakes up on this planet, and you have to kind of figure out why. Right? So the story here is very, very, very good and keeps you on the edge of your seat because there's a lot of stuff and it's a lot of like stuff that's very sus, right? There's, you know, I'm hip. I know the cool terms. Sus. You know, there's stuff that is just, you're like, I gotta know what's next, right? And there is a lot going great with this story. Now, there are points, and this might be I guess, the problem with taking a book and making a video game is that there were points where I'm like, this feels like why like there's the why doesn't really happen, like where I think you could probably portray it a little bit better if you were just reading a book. But like there's sometimes you're just like, I understand that this game is on one timeline. Why are they giving me options, right? Because
Yeah.
it seemed like no matter what option you chose, it still ended up in the same direction. Sure, it gave you a little bit of agency in terms of like how you want to play the character and how you want to kind of maybe try to figure out some stuff on your own. But there's a major point where basically it gives you two options. One option sounds like it'd be the end of the game, and the other option is no, you're going to continue doing this because the main character isn't really buying what the other character's telling her, right? And whether I wanted to end the game or not, I could tell that I need to go towards the other way, right? Because I didn't think it would matter if I went the one way. So I don't mind that, right? Like it kind of gives you some like different experiences. If you choose to do something else, it'll give you like some reason, like some gameplay reason that you can't or whatever. But I just didn't particularly enjoy that. Like if you just want to give us the story, give us the story. There is also just like a lot of like mystery is great, right? But like it just felt like there was a lot of repetitiveness in terms of like I get to this area, this same thing happened. I get to this area, this same thing happened, or whatever. I
Mhm.
felt like it started to get, you know, over and over. And I understand maybe they just want to extend the game a little bit, but uh, it didn't feel like I was the pace in which you are figuring out this mystery sometimes felt like it dragged. But that being said, the story was very good, and it, despite that it dragging, I was like, I gotta know what happens next. Now I played just over 5 hours. I'm right at the end, and I'm gonna finish it because I gotta know what the heck's happening. And
Yeah.
it's very interesting. I really like the kind of, sometimes when you do like a space sci-fi thing, you kind of want to just like thing or like stories or whatever, they fall into the trap of like, guns and stuff, pew pew pew. And this is not that. It's really just, you're just on this planet and you don't have any weapons or anything like that. You're just walking around and like figuring out what the heck happened and why you're there, which is pretty interesting. I like the flashbacks. You can unlock flashbacks that help explain why you even lost your memory in the first place, and you start to piece it together, which does feel satisfying. It felt like it dragged at points. Like the pacing was not the best. Like at first the pacing was like super quick, and then it would slow down after that. So
Yeah. Yeah. No, definitely agree. I found that there just weren't enough like exciting moments. Like I agree that like I needed to like I do want to finish the game because I need to know what happens. Like so it is kind of luring me in that way because of the story. But I just felt like, yeah, the beginning of the game, maybe the first hour or so is like, all right, you're figuring out, a few things. You find a camp, you need to figure out what's going on here. You got to repair a robot dude. There was plenty to do, but then there were definitely certain points where like I just felt like I was just walking, and like the only thing that was happening was dialogue, which like I guess is what happens in the novel. And I also don't know, neither of us have read this novel,
mhm.
and so I know all the time what happens with movies is that when a novel's turned into a movie, is they'll add things in the movie. They'll have things not they'll remove things that are supposed to be in the movie that were in the book. Um, all that sort of stuff. Like I was just watching like The Hobbit.
Mhm.
I just finished watching the first Hobbit, right? And like everyone always says there shouldn't be three movies for The Hobbit,
Yeah.
right? Because like they just add a bunch of stuff in there. So I don't know, maybe the book has more stuff going on than the game, and obviously games have their own budgets and all that sort of stuff. So that could be the reason, but I just felt like there is an exciting moment that happens, and like there's a few exciting moments, but I just felt like it was kind of too long in between them at certain times. Um, I also felt like with the dialogue options, like I think that's a great point. It's almost like they're like, okay, well, what game elements can we throw into this novel to make it feel more like a game? So they were like, oh, we'll just do like a Telltale game, where it's like this narrative. We'll give people different options, but the whole idea of that and the reason why people love that is because they can get different endings, based on the choices that they make, and that just doesn't happen in this game. So it's just very confusing of why we're getting different dialogue options, other than to like have different conversations. And then also talking about the dialogue choices, sometimes there would only be one dialogue choice. So I was like, why do I even need to choose this at all? Like, shouldn't she just start talking about this? So that maybe that's more on the gameplay side of things, but um, I just thought that was kind of odd. But yeah, there's definitely a lot of mystery in the story. I thought the voice acting was really great, and it's probably what carried the story along as well as it did. Yasna, and I think the guy is Novik,
Mhm.
who's like kind of up in the ship that you're kind of talking to throughout the entire game. So I thought the voice acting was great, and like the conversations they had, and they would butt heads at times, and there was some good depth in the conversation. It wasn't just like, find the crew, like it was kind of a little bit more than that. So, yeah, I thought the story overall was good. It's just, um, I will finish it. It's just, it is a little bit of that walking simulator at times where it's just like, the only thing that's getting you to continue playing is just to figure out what this mystery is. It's not because you're like excited about what's around the corner or anything like that. Like there's just it's a lifeless kind of place that you're in.
Hmm.
You know, you don't expect too much. But I will say, um, you know, there were times where I thought something was going to happen and nothing happened. So I guess that was intentional in a way. And but after that happens like 4 or 5 times, you just start to think like, what the hell is going
Hmm.
on? Like, can I just have something happen? So anyway, yeah. Overall, I did like the story so far, but I do think it could have been a little bit more fine tuned, I guess. But I guess if you're building a story based on a novel, maybe you don't have that much wiggle room. Not too sure, but
Yeah.
um, yeah, yeah. So those are my thoughts on that.
Yeah. And there was, I guess, there's some
Yeah,
points of tension, right? You know,
yeah,
and there were certain parts that I was like, I'm kind of scared, but
yeah,
it was not a vibe that carried through. The vibe was mainly just what the fuck's going on, you know, just like
yeah.
that. So yeah, but like it definitely it made me keep wanting to play even despite its issues. But now let's talk about the sound and the sound of music. The hills are alive. Very good. I found that you know it was nothing too crazy, nothing I was like, whoa, what are they doing here? But it was like, oh, this is run of the mill kind of space sounds and space, you know, and it sounded like you were running on rocks and stuff like that on a planet, and you know the ships moving and stuff like that sounded good, and it wasn't, you know, I don't think the music, sometimes it didn't match the vibe of the story. I felt like sometimes it would sound really scary and nothing scary
Mm.
was happening. And then sometimes you would be in a relatively scary moment and it would have that kind of like mystical, we're in space sound, which was interesting. Maybe that's just kind of like they have it like on like a repeat or something like that. I'm not sure. You know, obviously when
Mhm.
you would hit like a major moment, the music would change. But yeah, it was fine. I didn't have any issues. I did have a performance issue, which we will talk about. Um, and also, I skipped visuals for whatever reason. But we'll get to visuals after sound and music. But I did have a performance issue with the sound, which we'll get to. But yeah, the sound was fine. It definitely didn't you know, take me out of it. It definitely kept me immersed and really made sense for the setting and the story and
Yeah.
the gameplay.
Yeah, no, I think like some of those moments that I was mentioning before with the story where like I thought something was going to happen, like a lot of that was due to the sound. You know, it was just like it kind of felt like it was building up to something, especially like I was just thinking of like a moment where I was like climbing up something and I like because you're in first person, you don't know what's going to be at the top. And so I was like, oh, there's going to be like a creature up here or something. Like I'm gonna like freak out. But there was nothing up there. So but the sound definitely made me think that you know it would be going a certain direction. Yeah, as far as like the sound effects and things like that go, there aren't too many. You know, there's like your little detector, metal detector thingy that kind of hums a little bit, which is like all the sounds are kind of expected in that department. You know, the sound effects of the game where everything was kind of yeah, like I said, sort of expected. But yeah, I didn't really find. The music had like a major impact. There were actually a few times where I was like, I should just load up the Wizard with a Gun soundtrack and like play this game because it would fit that vibe so well. I didn't end up doing that just because I didn't think it would be fair to the review, but I figured like a banjo spacey vibe would be pretty cool. And it's also, you know, it's probably got to be pretty hard, right? Like taking a novel, making it a game, and trying to think about what does the music sound like
Hmm.
in, you know, something that's a novel. You know, they definitely didn't do a bad job. I think it was just exactly what I kind of expected. I didn't really pick up on like any weird moments like you were mentioning with like the sound, you know, not kind of matching the vibe of the scene or whatever was going on. It probably did happen. I just didn't really like notice it too much. But yeah, no, I think the sound and the music were overall just like as expected, pretty like average, I would say overall. but I know the art
They are the
is
visuals,
something that we
yes.
we need to talk about. Yes, which we did kind of touch on a little bit earlier when you mentioned that it was um, AAA worthy,
Oh
I
yeah.
guess you could say. But yeah, would love to know what are you thinking with the art, Tommy?
Yeah, I was very impressed, right? You know, it was beautiful, right? I will say, like, you're walking
Yeah,
through this planet, this world, and you're looking up into the sky. You can see other planets and stuff like that, and like it was dynamic too, so it didn't feel stationary at all. They really built out this whole world that you travel through, and I really didn't have an issue with any of it, and everything really looked great and looked like you could tell what you could interact with, which was perfect, and you could kind of tell what things were for as well. You can kind of like there were like maybe a couple points where like maybe I should be able to climb over this thing and you couldn't, but that was just me kind of like running around exploring, and I felt like it really was like a game that really I would have believed if you were like, oh yeah, this was made by like I don't know Bethesda or something like that. It just looked
yeah,
really really good, and I was very impressed. And you know, the music, like you know, sometimes like when it would get super mystical, right? I would look up into the sky. It would look really cool. Um, you know, I was a big fan of it, and like you know, you got to see some different terrains. Like at first, you're like, all right, this whole planet is kind of the same note, and then you kind of realize that it's ends up being a lot different as you move through, and you see like a lot of really interesting things that are to do with the story that we can't tell you about as you move through. And yeah, I thought it was really really neat, and they got the scaling right too, right? Because there's a lot of times when you're walking towards a something that's like far away, but you could still tell it's going to be huge, and when you get there, it is huge. And
yeah.
I think that was I think it was a home run. I think the visuals were great. I didn't have any qualms. Maybe you maybe saw a couple blips here and there based on like maybe me getting stuck in a spot, but that was very minor and didn't come up often. How about you?
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. I was getting a lot of like Starfield vibes from this game, which is funny. You know, you brought up Bethesda, and it was Bethesda, right? That you just brought
Yeah,
up,
yeah,
or am I? Okay, all right. Sorry, I'm sick. I don't remember things. But yeah, no, the visuals were probably the strongest part of the game for me. I think that it just looked fantastic, like the deserts that you're kind of looking at on this planet. You know, like you said, with like the skybox, with like the different planets you can see that are far away, just really looked great. And even like your character, I just thought it was really interesting how like you can kind of move your head around in your spacesuit.
hmm
So you can kind of see, you know, it's not like your spacesuit is just like attached to whatever wherever your view is. So it kind of gave you that extra layer of like reality in a way. And even like, you know, you're running for a certain amount of time and you start fogging up the glass, you know, that's like right in front of you. So like I'd have to like stop and, you know, wait till like the fog kind of went away and then like continue. So like those little small details right there I thought were really great. Even though I was frustrated with the rover, I thought it looked great
yeah,
on the inside. You know, you can switch seats, which is pretty cool, and like there's a little kind of like a puzzle thing you got to do in there. And that all looked great, you know, without getting into any spoilery details or anything like that. But yeah, overall, I mean, it just looked fantastic. It did remind me a lot of like the Solus project. I know I brought that up before, but that game, um, I had a great time playing that one, and it looked fantastic. So this one just, I had so many vibes that were similar to the Solus project with this game. So yeah, the art, it just they killed it overall. And you know, I can only imagine that in the novel as well, like they get really descriptive with the way things look. Especially like some of the stuff that you find on the planet that like is not kind of what you would normally find on a planet, I guess, is that there had to be a lot of descriptions in the novel to kind of get that right in the game, I assume. But yeah, overall the art was really fantastic. But I know you mentioned some performance issues, unless you had any more comments on the art.
one performance issue, actually one issue,
Yeah.
not one. It's not like an issue, but like I had one thing I noticed right away actually with the visuals
Yeah.
was the way your character runs. It seemed very silly to me because you can see your shadow, right?
Yeah.
And it just looks like that. Like for the listeners, I'm just flailing my arms. It is it was silly, but like I was
Yeah.
just like, oh, that's weird, and then I kind of forgot about it for the rest of the game. But yeah, one performance issue on my side. Now I played it on Steam, and so I don't know, like I don't know if it was the game. I've never experienced this before, so I can't imagine it's on my side. But there were multiple times where, like, when the audio would get more complex, it would start blipping, like it would cut out a little bit,
Oh.
and then it cut out
Mm.
completely. And the first time I had to fix it, I just like rebooted, right, and it was fine. And then it happened again, and I turned off my audio interface, which is new, relatively new, and turned it back on, and then it worked again. So that happened a couple times. I'm not sure if that's a known bug or performance issue, or maybe it was just on my end, but that happened a couple times, and I was like, not. It was kind of annoying at first. I thought, well, I was more annoyed when I thought I would have to reboot every single time, but once I figured out that if I just reset my audio real quick, it was fine. But yeah, I'm not sure. I didn't look into any known bugs or anything like that. But I don't know. Did you experience any issues?
Yeah, I definitely had, like I mentioned, I played it on Steam on my PC, and then I played it on the Steam Link. So the way that the Steam Link works is that it's kind of using your internet to like cast what's on your computer onto like your TV or whatever else you have it plugged into. So some of this could have been, just my internet had issues. But even when I was playing directly on my PC, I did have some frame drops. I know it's a newer game, so they're probably working on optimizing some of that stuff. And because the game looks so great, you're kind of gonna have frame drops at some point. But definitely, like sometimes when I was moving my camera around, it would kind of like jerk a little bit. But for the most part, I really didn't have any issues. They do actually have a list of like known issues and bugs, and none of what you mentioned is actually on that list.
Okay.
So hopefully, if the devs are listening to this, that's a new bug there for you, because that's definitely something that I think could frustrate a lot of people. And then the only other thing, and this isn't, I guess, it's not really on the performance side, but when I installed the game, uh, we actually, when I installed the game a few days later, when I went to play it, it had to download 37 gigs again
Mm.
for some reason. So like I was all ready to play, and then I just had to sit there for like 20 minutes waiting for the game to download. So I don't know if that's like a Steam issue or like the game, maybe they like pushed a new version or something like that. But I don't know. I don't know really who's at fault for that. It could be me as well. I'm not too sure, but that was just something that I just found really odd. That I've never had an issue like that before with any of the other games that we played. So, yeah, but really, all in all, like, it was just like a few drop frames I had while playing. Over the course of like the 5 hours or so I played. Maybe like I don't know. I dropped like 1,000 frames, something like that, which is like not too crazy. But yeah, so the performance, I'm sure they'll fix some of those issues, since it is a new game. But I know we need to get into our ratings for the
Yes.
game, Tommy. So you want to explain to the listeners how this works?
Yeah, so we have a rating system that's based on groceries because we are fresh juice after all. Our best games are going to be the certified fresh juice. These are games that hopefully get nominated for game of the year. Maddie gave Cocoon certified fresh juice. That has been
Ooh.
nominated for game of the year for the indies. We have a steel. It's kind of like a little step down. Great, still really good. You're happy paying the price for it. Whatever, it's really good. And then beyond that, we have get on sale. Right, it's a premium product, but maybe you don't want to spend that kind of chunk of change, so you wait till it goes on sale. You get a lot of sales, indie, sales all the time. After that, you got manager specials. These are the things that aren't so great, but maybe are worth it if it's only a couple bucks. And then finally, something that nobody wants is spoiled milk. Now, I'll start with my rating. I'm gonna give it. So it's a $30 game, right? Looks beautiful.
We did get it for
We did
free
get it for
from the
free. Yeah,
developers,
we did.
just to be
Yeah, just to
transparent.
be transparent. But $30 game, which is on the higher end for indie games. I'm gonna give it a get on sale. I think that the game is good, certainly good. However, some of the pacing issues and whatnot, and then also it's like I think the main story is like 5 or 6 hours from what I read. Um, it's you would hope for a little bit longer. I think if you were spending $30, at least I would. And also, some of the issues with the pacing and I mean, I guess performance. I mean, obviously that can always be fixed, but I just I liked it, but it didn't. It wasn't a $30 game to me. It might have been like 20. I think 20 is probably pretty fair. But not to like give it like a number, but like it is a get on sale. Definitely worth your time if you see it's on sale. And I'm sure it will be at some point. And yeah, no, I mean you will have a great experience with this game, especially if you love narrative based stuff, or if you're a fan of the novel, you might want to just like pop this one on. So yeah, get on sale for me.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I'm going with the same rating here for me. Get on sale. I actually wrote down, if this game is ever 50% off, $15, I think it's worth the pickup, which I could see happening. I agree that I think $30. The only real reason I could think of why they priced it that way is because it's based on the novel, so
Mhm.
they know they already have an audience that might, that's more interested in purchasing it. So they're able to maybe get a little bit more out of there. I'm not too sure, but it does seem like the story is a little short for a game that's $30. And like you mentioned, 30 is kind of on the higher side for a lot of indie games. So you expect either a lot of replay value out of it or just a lot of story elements that make it seem like it's worth it. Um, so yeah, I'm giving this a get on sale. I think the art is great, the story is great, but I think it is kind of held back by some gameplay elements. So that's what I'm going to give it as well. And I think with a few updates, this game will also fix some of those performance issues. So if you're kind of hesitant about any of those, I wouldn't really say that the performance issues are a reason not to pick up the game right now. I would just say maybe wait till the next Steam sale and see if it goes on sale at any point. But it's also definitely a unique game, because it is so story driven and it's a very slow paced game. I've never really played a game like it before, so I do think it's worth picking up just for that fact alone. But yeah, that's looks like we're on the same page for this one, which is good to hear, especially since this is kind of a newer type of genre for us on the podcast. It seems like we're on the same wavelength for it.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and it's very interesting, and maybe the $30 price tag also might come with having the really good voiceover work, which you had mentioned. It
Mm.
was excellent. Now, do you have any listener questions? I have one.
I don't have any from my end, no.
This one comes from Capolo, who asks, and I don't know, I'm not very familiar with this, but you might be. Have you watched the ex indie developers build a game without communicating? What do you think about it? If so, I haven't watched that, but um, and yeah, that was the question. And then I guess there's a follow up question if you had watched it.
The ex indie developer, what, they built a game without communicating?
Yeah, that's what it sounds like, which I had not heard of, but
I had not heard of
it
either.
sounds really
Yeah,
cool.
that'll definitely be something I look into after the show, though.
Yeah, yeah, certainly.
But unfortunately, I don't
We
know
don't know.
about that.
Just
But that sounds awesome.
yeah.
Um,
Sorry, Cap. We don't know what it is, but
yeah,
we're gonna find out. I'll tell you that much. But
yep.
that does bring us to the rec room where we recommend something, perhaps not indie game related. What are you recommending this week?
Yeah, so I threw in here lessons in chemistry, which I don't believe I've talked about on the show before. So apologies if I have, but it's a new Apple TV show with Brie Larson. And essentially, the plot of the show is she is it takes place in the 1950s. She's like a lab tech And she's brilliant, like just really smart, but she's not like a full scientist because back then, women, I guess, didn't get those opportunities. So she's kind of overlooked in a lot of different cases and things like that. And she also has a passion for cooking. So all of her kind of science knowledge she uses to also cook, and you kind of get a glimpse of like a cooking show that she eventually, I guess, has at some point. We haven't gotten to that point yet. We're only like 3 episodes in, but overall, I think it's a really great pacing and storytelling. And I think Brie Larson's doing a great job of kind of portraying this like kind of uptight, you know, practically genius when it comes to whatever science stuff she's trying to work on. They're trying to win like a Nobel Prize, so it's like kind of the higher tier of the scientists, I guess. I don't know enough about it, but it's great so far. I definitely recommend it. I would say in general, Apple TV shows have been pretty much bangers. Not every single one, but for this one, we've been really enjoying it. But Tommy, what are you recommending to the folks today?
That sounds good. I do have to get Apple TV so I can start watching some of these shows now.
Yeah.
I am recommending an album that just came out this past week by Daniel Donato and his band Cosmic Country. It's so their band, they play a lot of kind of like country influenced jam band funk. It's just they blend a lot of genres, and like they jam a lot too, and they're really really good. And the new album is called Reflector, and it really brings that like Allman Brothers vibe. If you kind of like the Allman Brothers, and it really there's some fun like upbeat jams, and then there's some ballads on there too. I think a track that I really enjoyed there's 3 tracks I would recommend. High Country, it was like HI dash country, I believe. And then there is Sugar Leg Rag, which is like an instrumental, just like kind
Sugar Leg Rag.
yeah. And then Dance in the Desert, which is a funky tune-ski. So yeah, check it out. And if you ever get a chance to see them live, Daniel Donato's just incredible guitarist, just shreds. So yeah, that's my recommendation. So let's plug our plugs.
Let's do it.
Let's
plug it up.
Where can people find you, Matty Juice?
Yeah. So if you want to find me outside of the podcast, at Matty Gorm, GORM, on all the socials, Twitter, TikTok, all your favorite platforms. And then if you do want to follow the podcast, at Fresh Juice Pod on Twitter, YouTube, TikTok, and now on Instagram. So check us out on the IGs. But yeah, Tommy, where can people find you? You mentioned some other podcasts earlier in the show. Where can they find you?
Yeah, you can continue to find me at Fresh Buds Pod on Twitter. That's where I post mostly about Flesh and Blood, a trading card game that I have a podcast about called Fresh and Buds. It's not a weed podcast, but I would understand if you thought so. And I have guests from all over the community every week. I think I'm rocking solo this week, though, which is always fun. That's how I started. Back to my roots. So
the OG.
Just love sitting behind a mic and just losing my mind while I'm talking to myself. It's a lot of fun. It's entertainment if it's anything. Yeah, you can continue to find me there, and that YouTube is a lot of fun too. And yeah, if you see me on the street, just say hi and maybe mug me or something. There will be no money in my wallet, unfortunately. But yeah, it's going to do it for the show. Please check out all the stuff. Give us the old comment link or like and subscribees, all that fun stuff. I've been one of your hosts. Matty's been one of your hosts. And stay fresh and stay juicy, juice heads. See you later.
See ya.